All right, thanks everyone for your patience. Let's go ahead and get things started. So welcome to Auvik's product roll-up and roadmap, November 2020 edition. Just to get things kicked off, a couple of quick housekeeping items here. If you can't hear us, just make sure to increase the device volume or click on the audio settings to test your sound. The volume will be coming directly from Zoom, so there isn't a dial-in so just use the computer audio settings. In terms of questions, I think we'll try to do today is we'll try to use the Q&A panel as much as possible. So you should be able to see that in your Zoom panel. So just go ahead and go in there, submit questions. We'll try to answer as many as possible at the time of the question if it's relevant to the content that we're going through at the moment. Otherwise, we'll have a dedicated section towards the end of the session just to make sure the flow goes well, as this webinar is going to be recorded. And on that note, we will be posting the recording up on our Frankly IT website. If you are a customer or a partner, please note that we've already done one of these ones, and the recording is already up on the training portal. And last but not least, just in terms of time expectations, I'm expecting this to probably last around 30-ish minutes today, and then we'll have a Q&A, and depending on how many questions we get, we'll see how long that part lasts. All right, so just to get things started, if you haven't been on a webinar with us before for our roadmap, my name is Patrick Albert, so VP of Product Management here at Auvik. I'm really excited to also be joined here with Julie. Julie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Forsyth, and I have the pleasure of leading the engineering organization at Auvik.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Julie.
Really excited to be here, Pat.
All right, so just to start off this webinar, I like going through a bit of a roll-up as to what we've launched and what we've done in the last couple of months, just as a bit of a refresher, and I think it also sets the stage for where we're going in the next few months. So I guess first and fresh off the press is our Syslog for Troubleshooting feature. This was launched about a month, or I guess a couple months ago at this point. But the purpose of what we were trying to do here is really allow for centralized troubleshooting of network devices or devices in general using log capabilities. So the idea here is to centralize Syslog for all of your devices, so you don't have to jump onto each device to look at its logs and jump in from one to the other. And it's all about getting more context from all of these devices. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, we're now ingesting or consuming all of the logs from these network devices and showing them in our user interface alongside with all of the other information that Auvik already provides you. So things like our hardware lifecycle, all of our traditional learning, and our performance measurements. So that's all alongside with that information. So now you can just jump into the Syslog View Logs tab, and you can see all of the logs for all the incident or all the different messages that were provided by the device. And again, the goal here is really to centralize it, but also make it so that it's a great user experience. So you don't have to log into the command line of a device and go up and down through various different logs. You don't have to know all the terminology or the command structure or how to search in command. You don't have to export them to another source and kind of go through it that way. It's all done through our user interface that is all very standardized. So again, if you go in and you can follow the same standard approaches to searching, sorting, filtering, etc., that you would already be accustomed to for the rest of the product. And last but not least is the ability to export this all the logs into a CSV. And this is really common for scenarios where you're working with a vendor and they're requesting an export of the logs. You can do this just directly from our user interface and then send those logs off to the vendor in question. So again, trying to make this as simple and easy as possible. And we'll talk shortly about what we have roadmap for this, but I think this is the foundation of a really exciting feature. Quick question just popped up around the Syslog history. So because we're storing it for the purposes of troubleshooting primarily at this point, we are storing about 2 weeks worth of history. We will talk a little more about that in the roadmap section. Next up is we very recently introduced a whole slew of new statistics APIs. And these APIs allow you to connect Auvik metrics and Auvik information, Auvik data into your business intelligence tools and other dashboards you may have. So there's a significant amount of APIs that we've introduced for those that are a little more technical on the call today. But the idea here is trying to allow you to expand our product into all the other different BI tools, so you can offer standardized reporting or dashboarding across all the different solutions. Another thing we just recently released is the ability to integrate Auvik into a SAML 2.0 provider, so an identity provider such as Okta or OneLogin or otherwise. So if you have all of your identity organized through one of those platforms for your organization, you can now enable SSO within our product and connect into those identity providers for authentication purposes. And last year, we launched what we're calling our technology partnership program, which is largely leveraging our APIs that we published and we just talked about amongst all the other APIs we launched last year, and some home-built integrations that we've done. And over the last couple of months, we've added quite a few new vendors into our technology partnership program. A couple of genies so Chat Genie and Ops Genie, Captain's Chair, Duo, OneLogin on the SSO front, and soon we'll be launching an integration with IT Portal as well. TrafficInsights is a capability we launched last year, which is the ability to take net flow or take a flow of information from the devices as to what's actually transpiring on the network, how are people using the network, and visualizing that information so you can better understand what's happening on the network, why it's slow, where your traffic is going to, and how the network is ultimately being used. So it can really help you along the front of capacity planning and troubleshooting. So in the last couple of months, we did a huge update to what we call our application classification system. And this is the technology that we have built to take traditional NetFlow, which is very raw in its form, and it doesn't tell you what type of application it is. It just tells you, what type of packet was sent through on what port and what type of technology. But it doesn't actually tell you the application or the reason or the business reason behind that type of traffic. So it's very raw in its form. So we've updated our application classification system drastically increase the amount of applications that we can automatically detect. So we went from 13 to 16 broad overall categories. And then the individual applications, we've increased it to almost 300 applications that we can automatically detect. So huge improvements there. Another thing we've been focusing on is tracking changes that are done by our users within our platform. So we've had a lot of requests around audit logs and such. So we've introduced a new user activity report that allows you to track changes by users to the configuration of the Auvik product, things like maintenance windows, exporting data, changing configurations of devices, changing alert definitions or such. So being able to easily understand who did what and when. We also improved our alerting capabilities in the event that you're using a maintenance window to suppress alerts. So say you're doing a scheduled downtime on a network and you anticipate the network's going to be down for, let's say, an hour while you're updating the firmware on a firewall, but at the same time one of your VMware hypervisors has a disk issue. What we want to do, what we wanted to do, and what we're allowing you to do via this new enhancement, is allowing you to let Auvik know that you want to know about alerts that are still unresolved after the maintenance window. So if an unrelated event occurred during the maintenance window which is still an issue after the maintenance window concludes, you have the ability to now have Auvik automatically send you a ticket or an email notification that the issue still persists. We've also been working on some user experience tweaks, so just making it easier to roll the product out, and also work on some of the authorizations. So one of the things we did recently is the ability to copy parent permissions. So if you're adding a site into the Auvik platform, you can now opt to copy the user permissions or the user authorizations from a parent site or a global site. So if you have technicians that should have access to all the different sites, or a subset of the sites that you manage, when you add a new one, you can now easily copy the technicians or the permissions from those particular sites, as opposed to adding them one by one. And just a couple other small things on the roll up front before we get into roadmap is we've been really working on the identification aspect of our product. And this is the ability for us to, when we go off and do a discovery, understand what is physically on the network. So we've introduced a brand new rule-based identification architecture and some new protocols, somewhat technical here. But the outcome is, just in Q3 alone, we were able to identify and discover 20,000 more devices than we were previously able to. Before, we'd still identify that there's something there. We'd still see, hey, if something's listening or something's on this IP address or something, we see something. But now, with the beginnings of this new architecture, we're already able to identify what those devices are in 20,000 new instances. And we'll talk about this a little more in the roadmap section, but this is the start of a pretty exciting future. And last but not least is we've recently introduced Aruba stack support. So stacking is something we've supported a variety of different vendors. Aruba was one of the most common ones that we did not support, so we just recently added support into it.
20,000 devices, Pat, that's a lot.
It is, and I'm really excited because that was our first pass. That was our trial run, almost, if you want to say, of this new identification engine. So I'm excited what we can do in the future with it.
Yeah, lots more investment being made here by the engineering team. So let's get into the roadmap. Earlier this year, in our May roadmap presentation and webinar, we talked about some really big investments that we're making from a platform perspective of our base and our core product. And the work that we're doing sets us up for success as we continue to grow rapidly. It'll help us iterate towards zero downtime, but also help us build and deliver new features much quicker. While we've been making really good progress on that, there are also some other things that we're working on that we want to give you an update on. So let's get started on diving into the details of our roadmap.
Awesome.
So Pat, when we talk about roadmap and we talk about the role of product management within our organization, planning what to include in upcoming releases and where our vision lies for our product, these are some hard decisions to make from a product perspective. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the themes that you're using to track and plan the roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. So we lightly introduced them earlier on in the year, but these are definitely themes that we're continuing to invest heavily in, and I think they're very much aligned with a lot of the different requests that we get. And we'll talk about our intake process, I think, a little bit later on. But broadly speaking, the big themes that we're working on is troubleshooting, which is the ability for technicians to come in, easily use the product to be able to diagnose and identify and resolve issues. The concept of extensibility, and this is basically predicated based off of the fact that Auvik has worked very hard over the last number of years to provide an exceptional out-of-box experience. Our goal is really to be able to go onto a network, scan the network, and automatically set up monitoring and such and alerting based off best practices. So, our goal is really to make it as easy as possible. But the reality is, there's definitely scenarios where we're not going to be able to have out-of-box configuration for absolutely everything. We strive for it. We monitor it. We track how often people have to customize the product, and we really strive to drive that down. But we also recognize the fact that there's scenarios where it's not going to be possible. Particularly things like geographic expansion, when we're going into new areas, new markets, or potentially you have sites in new areas and new markets that are using very specific network equipment or very specific gear for that region. or other types of equipment that come up within your sites that are just non-standard, effectively not very popular. So our goal here is to be able to make the product as extensible as possible. So we've been working behind the scenes on making it easier for us to be able to add support. So effectively trying to make it easier and faster for us to improve our out-of-box experience. And our goal is to continue to refine that and get it to a point where people can actually extend the product itself. So if we don't monitor a particular version of like a LANCOM device that is really popular in Germany, you would be able to go in and extend our monitoring capabilities and such to be able to monitor those devices. That is a broad theme. There's a lot of different things that come together to be able to do that, and we'll talk about some of them shortly. But that's in essence the theme. And the last is around automated documentation. So this is the idea of really, really improving our ability to go into a network and understand what's on it. And document a lot of the different aspects of the devices. So we'll talk a little bit about this one, a couple more concrete examples in our roadmap. But that again, that's broadly speaking the theme of the work that, or the theme of what we're trying to accomplish there. So let's go ahead and start to kick things off, Julie.
All right, so let's start with troubleshooting. On our roadmap for troubleshooting is really around some extension work that we'll complete for Syslog. And so with Syslog, as Pat spoke earlier in the webinar, with that launch recently behind us, we've been listening to stories and examples of our beta and regular customers of how they're using Syslog and feeding that into the product roadmap. And so some of the next features that we're working on for Syslog include exporting logs out to Amazon S3 on more of a regular basis. And this is going to provide additional extended data retention in case you need it for a longer period of time to go hunting for information in data logs. We'll likely look at Azure and other storage methods afterwards, but we're going to start with Amazon S3. We're also simplifying the setup experience. So Pat talked about the out-of-box experience, and we are also ensuring that we're demonstrating our value and commitment to an easy, intuitive experience when setup is occurring, whether it be with our product or with Syslog. And so as part of that, we're going to be introducing some global configuration views, which will certainly help as part of the setup processes around Syslog. And then longer term, we plan on looking at messaging or at message tagging, and this will further improve the log analysis experience that our partners and our customers have.
Thanks, Julie. So the next theme that we're going to chat about is the extensibility one. So as I kind of alluded to in the introduction to the theme, a lot of this work is truly behind the scenes, at least for the foreseeable future, while we make it easier for us to extend our product for our own development team. And then the next phase will be to extend it to non-developers effectively. But one of the things that we are working on right now that is going to be accessible to our users is far more configuration and control over alerts. And we're going to start with Syslog for that. So we're going to give you the ability to create your own alerts for Syslog monitoring purposes. Those of you familiar with Syslog, it contains a wealth of information. It contains information as to what every device, what every device is doing, all the different things that are happening on the device. And not only can it provide a great trail of clues, which is where we're coming at it from the troubleshooting perspective, but it can also tell you flat out that there's different problems. So things like VPNs down, or if there's failed SSH attempts, it'll have log messages to let you know that those things happened. So again, Syslog is really kind of a two-pronged problem from our perspective, from the troubleshooting perspective, and also from a monitoring perspective. So again, what we're working on from the extensibility front is the ability to create your own alerts using Syslog messages, and you can kind of see an example of what that looks like above. But also we're going to be really, again, focusing on the out-of-box experience. So we really want to make sure we've solved for most of the typical network issues that you'll experience. So a couple of examples are cited here. If you have any others, we'd absolutely love to hear them as we build this out. All right, the next theme that we talked about is automated documentation. So this is, again, trying to help you automate all the information about your network. So the first big thing that we want to announce here is that we've just gone to beta with some Power BI based reporting templates. And this is really exciting because Power BI is one of the best cheap or free BI solutions out there. It's really, really powerful, really standard across so many different industries. But what's even more important, what's even more important than the than the templates themselves, is we're actually going to be open sourcing these, so the community can use them, contribute to them, modify them, and such. So we've come up with a couple different templates that we'll walk through here. The first is a overall QBR report. And this QBR report, as you can kind of see, is really largely a state of the union over the quarter. So you can take a look at how many issues were created versus resolved, what types of alerts we found, a quick view of the hardware inventory at the top, so how many switches, routers, etc., and some at-risk inventory. So if you followed our announcement about mid last year, we started to track the warranty coverage information for Cisco devices, so we can indicate what devices are at risk from a warranty perspective. We're also introducing a template for inventory management. So this gives you a great deep dive on terms of the assets discovered and managed in a particular network. Also a NOC style report that's really focused on incidents and issues. And lastly, a review of the device performance. So as mentioned here, the idea behind these Power BI templates is to provide you with a really strong starting point that you can then customize and incorporate into any of your other Power BI reports. Now, just to head off another question that's probably in the back of your minds, with the recent launch of our statistics APIs, companies like BrightGauge and others can also start pulling our data into their products as well. So we're going to be working with several other vendors in terms of timing and integration. Don't have any specific dates to report back on yet. But now that those APIs are out, we can also power a bunch of other integrations, which we'll definitely be working on. But we also wanted to provide some open source Power BI templates just as a starting point, and it's I think it's going to be really exciting to see how the community evolves these templates going forward. Again, also along the automated documentation theme, we're going to soon start pulling in several new pieces of information about the devices that we discovered. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, about last year, we introduced a feature that allows us to pull end-of-life information for Cisco devices. So we're looking to broaden the set of devices that we support there to Fortinet and others. And we're also looking at bringing in the pictures of the physical hardware and links to the data sheets from the manufacturer. This information from a technician perspective is really invaluable when you're trying to troubleshoot or even just do a network assessment. Having all this at your fingertips without actually having to do any additional work or configuration is really powerful. And as we get further into this initiative, we'll have a little more information in terms of will it support model XYZ by vendor X, but ultimately we're hoping to support a ton of devices at launch time. So stay tuned for some more information there. Also, we'll be introducing some global views of this information so you can see it across all of your sites at once. And I guess lastly on the documentation front, we've just recently added support for, we will soon be adding support for FortiLink, which is a vendor-specific management feature, but that's really common in much larger complex networks. So we'll be adding this in the near term. So if you have FortiLink devices or devices that are configured in a FortiLink scenario, we'll be able to pull that information in directly. Now, just to play off some of the things that Julie talked earlier about platform investments, we were able to add this in a fraction of the time that it would have taken previously with our older architecture. So really starting to see some of those dividends pay back.
Microservices for the win. Yeah. So now on to usability. So I mentioned a little bit earlier in our webinar that we care a lot about usability and intuitiveness in the product. Obviously, we want to have an inclusive design, but it should also be easy, simple to use. And so here's some of the highlights and investments that we're making in usability. We are going to make it even easier to set up Auvik. It's one of the things that we're known for is the easy implementation and initial setup of the overall product. And we're going to make it even easier to set up Auvik on a new site or client. And we'll be doing that by introducing a new updated Windows installer. So after this round of updates, installing the collector is going to be a breeze. The installer aspects of the collector are very intuitive and easy to execute. And we'll also continue to support command line installs for all my nerdy and my geeky type people who are out there trying to recreate the CLI magic within Windows.
I'm excited for that too.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. With SSO hot off the press, so Pat talked about SSO, Single Sign-On, earlier in the presentation. We're working on moving all of our users to our new platform and plugging in all of their other Auvik assets. And so there will be no more need for a specific login for our training portal, for support. You'll notice some few other things here, such as subscription management on this particular diagram, which we are also working on, and we'll make some further investments in that going forward. And then, of course, as I spoke a little bit about our engineering practices and our investments in our core and platform, as engineering continues to evolve, we have dedicated time in our day to work on making improvements that matter to you the most. We appreciate the feedback and the insight that we get into the experiences that you're having with the product and the challenges that you're trying to solve in the IT space. And it makes a big difference when the tool that you have works well for you in as many aspects as possible. And so the engineering organization is dedicated to ensuring that we continue to make good improvements that matter to you the most to make your job that much easier. So finally, we're just about to open up to Q&A in just a moment, but I wanted to touch on, Pat and I wanted to touch on a little bit about how we incorporate the needs of our customers and our partners into our roadmap planning. And so Pat, you've made some big investments in this of late. I'm wondering, does it make sense for you to talk through and walk through the group at a really high level, your product intake process, specifically around how we collect information from our customers and our partners and our prospects?
Yeah, and to make this even more fun, Julie, I'm going to turn this question directly on to you because there's a fire alarm going off here, which is fantastic, perfect timing during a webinar.
I love it.
So I'll get you to answer that question.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been tracking requests for quite some time. The process that we use, or the tooling that we use, is called AHA. And we use that tool for all of our road mapping, but we also use it to collect information and track top ideas from our customers, prospects, and partners. And so we use that list. I don't believe that we have anything. I'm going to look for Pat for a nod or a head shake. I don't believe we have upvoting or any voting in place today. We do not. Yeah, I'm good at this. This mime thing is going to work out well for us.
Not publicly, at least. It's done by our support team.
Yeah, and so your needs are really incorporated through the relationship that you build with support, through the relationship that you have with your partner success manager. We take those insights, we track them, and we tally how many of those things are coming up regularly. Many of those ideas have already been incorporated into our roadmap, and we continue to plan on using this as a source to help lead us to areas of the product that need attention the most and areas that you want to see the most improvement or enhancement. So you can see some contact information there. Thanks so much for joining us today. And if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We're pretty excited to talk about a product that we're really proud of.